Hello everyone and welcome back. Just a couple of weeks ago, the supreme leader in Iran said that if there's to be any deal between the United States and Iran over its nuclear program, that there has to be immediate relief in terms of sanctions being lifted. And following that, just last week, President Obama of the United States said that Iran basically would receive that sanctions relief right away. It would be phased in, evidently, but there would be some immediate relief right up front. There was a headline just the other day in the Wall Street Journal which said, whatever the Ayatollah wants. And why not keep, from his perspective, why not keep asking? Why not keep making demands? Because as numerous reports have suggested, really it's the United States that's more desperate here to make a deal than even the mullahs there in Tehran. According to that Wall Street Journal article, it said that that immediate relief would come in the form of $30 to $50 billion of assets being released. It's estimated that there's at least 100 to maybe even $150 billion worth of frozen assets. Cash, in other words, that Iran would all of a sudden have access to, and you can be sure that once that money is freed up, there's going to be businesses, there's going to be world leaders lining up to get a piece of that financial pie. You probably saw the report just last week coming out of Russia with Vladimir Putin selling that sophisticated defense system, those missiles, the S-300s, to Iran. And then following in line behind him, you have big corporations in the West, companies in the United States, right here in the UK, that are anxious to do business with this new customer. That Russian deal, by the way, they lifted the ban on delivering those S-300s. It was a deal they struck back in 2007, an $800 million deal for this defense system. And Russia put a stop to it in 2007. Why? Because the United States and Israel protested strongly, saying that if they went ahead with this deal, it would enable Iran to protect its nuclear facilities. That was just in 2007. That was just a few short years ago. Last week, when Russia decided to lift that ban and to go ahead with the sale, Prime Minister Netanyahu called Vladimir Putin and pleaded with him to stop the shipment, to cancel the deal. But it was to no avail. Look at how things have changed in just a few short years. Israel's defense minister said this sale is a direct result of the nuclear deal that's being worked out between the United States and Iran. And this deal, we've been told, is supposed to prevent Iran from going nuclear. But far from preventing it, as you can see even from recent headlines, it's actually protecting Iran's nuclear program. What a development. Is this significant with respect to Bible prophecy? I mean, how can anyone seriously dispute what that defense minister said? Here you have all these negotiations going on, and Iran is just gaining strength and power. And you can see it all over the Middle East. You can see it as it expands its operations in Iraq and in Syria, in Yemen, and elsewhere with Hezbollah, Hamas, and on it goes. Let me just show you a clip of what President Obama said just last week in response to the news that Russia was going forward with the sale of these S-300s.
And with respect to the Russian sales, I will tell you this is actually a sale that was slated to happen in 2009. When I first met with then Prime Minister Putin, they actually stopped the sale, paused or suspended the sale at our request. And I'm frankly surprised that it held this long, given that they were not prohibited by sanctions from selling these defensive weapons.
So you can see from that statement, there's no outrage at all. Really, there's not even the slightest protest It's basically just accepting the fact that Russia's going forward, expressing surprise that it didn't happen sooner. That's coming from the United States of America. The only nation really to protest it, of course, is Israel. They're shocked. They're sitting back wondering, what is happening? What about our security? It's as if the United States, it's as if the leaders in Washington are totally fine. I mean, you talk about providing cover for Iran's nuclear program. Here you have this deal that's going to lift the sanctions, that's going to provide this windfall of cash for Iran, and then now you have Russia sending weapons that are intended to shoot down missiles or to protect the nation of Iran against an attack coming on those nuclear facilities. Let me just go to a New York Times piece. This is from April the 19th. The title, "Billboards in Iran say death to America, but officials say, let's make a deal." Notice what this article reveals. It's very revealing. Just as the Obama administration and Congress were wrangling over details of a nuclear agreement with Iran last week, the group of 24 executives were touring the country on a fact-finding mission. These are 24 businessmen, in other words, that are supposedly on a fact-finding mission. It says, of course, the organizers rushed to explain this was by no means a business delegation. I mean, even the New York Times there sounds skeptical. Well, we're just tourists, they say. This is not a business delegation at all. And yet there they are, gathering facts. Gathering facts for what? Well, like Vladimir Putin, they want to get in on the business transactions that are going to open up when all of a sudden these assets are no longer frozen. Continuing in the New York Times, it says American companies are barred from doing business in Iran, which remains under a regimen of sanctions aimed at pressuring the country to curtail its nuclear program. I mean, those sanctions are aimed at pressuring Iran from curtailing the program. So what happens when those sanctions are lifted? What kind of pressure, if any, will that apply? The sanctions, which cover financial transactions as well as a host of industries like petroleum and shipping, have put a stranglehold on the Iranian economy, which is struggling with inflation and shortages of food and consumer goods. I mean, they were really having an effect, in other words. They were really crippling Iran and its leadership. Now they're about to be lifted, though. It says, with the United States and Iran currently negotiating a nuclear deal under which those sanctions would eventually be lifted, some American companies, notice this, are now hoping for new business opportunities in a country that has long been off limits. You see, the American corporations are right there standing in line as well. Along with European companies, along with British companies, everyone's lining up, you see, because it's all about getting money. It's all about getting in on this deal. Why, this is a great opportunity the way they see it. Never mind the ban, never mind our security, never mind Israel's security. Shocking. It says the visit to Iran by the American group, which included venture capitalists and business executives from a range of industries, including real estate, healthcare, and insurance, was organized by individual members of the young president's organization. Last week's trip was the group's third to the Islamic Republic. The third visit. But this is no business delegation, of course. They're just tourists. They're just tourists. Not even the New York Times buys that. One last quote. It says, since this gives you some of the history of what it's been in the last 20 years. Since 1995, sanctions have barred Americans from doing business in Iran, where a substantial middle class represents a potentially lucrative market for foreign companies. Hopes that the nuclear framework agreement made on April 2nd might lead to a broader deal by the end of June have raised expectations of an opening of the Iranian market. Still, it says, most companies are waiting for a final deal before seriously considering investing here. Well, a lot of them are already lining up. A lot of them are already lining up. That article, by the way, it quotes one of the businessmen asking a religious leader on this tour, well, what about all these Death to America slogans that you see, that you hear about on the news? And this religious leader said, oh, that's from a different era. I mean, this is the new Iran. It's different now. And the thing is, they were chanting those slogans just last week on Saturday for Army Day in Iran, as they led all these weapons, paraded all these weapons through Iran, and people were chanting, and the television was televising the display, and these chants. And President Rouhani was there. I mean, their top officials were there participating in this celebration, this televised broadcast. It showed the repeated cries of death to America, death to Israel, and so on. And the TV announcer said this during the broadcast: if Israel makes a mistake, those in Tel Aviv and Haifa will not sleep at night. Not one person. That's America's partner here. That's who America is trying to strike a deal with. That's who Vladimir Putin is supplying with missiles. That's the nation that American corporations are now lining up to do business with. I mean, these are frightening developments, really. And when you understand Bible prophecy, I just want to direct you to one verse in particular. Go and read Hosea 5 and verse 13. You can see on our website, thetrumpet.com. If you just run a search on that verse, you can see what we've said about that in the years past. I mean, we've been saying it for many years. Certainly, you can see with Israel and Prime Minister Netanyahu crying aloud, and the United States just turning a blind eye to all these chants, all these developments, the nuclear program itself. You can see why Israel is going to desperately, or in desperation, turn to Germany. This particular issue, by the way, from the Trumpet magazine, you see the world leaders on this cover, and the only one that's missing is the strongman, the prophesied strongman to come out of the heart of Europe. And when that happens, you can expect that the little nation of Israel is going to go to that individual and his nation and to seek help because of this emerging threat that now, well, it's not even emerging anymore. It's out there. It's making its power grab in Yemen, in Syria, in Iraq, and elsewhere. And you certainly need to subscribe to the Trumpet if you haven't already, so that you can be aware of what's happening in your world and understand these events under the clear light of Bible prophecy. Obviously, you can go to thetrumpet.com as well to read some of our articles today. But make sure, if you haven't already, that you subscribe to the Trumpet magazine. Thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.